Ragnarok is coming, and Kratos is about to have another extremely violent clash with the North Pantheon of gods. You guys ready for the Dad of Boy Simulator Part 2, the Atreus Boogaloo? Welcome to my initial thoughts on God of War Ragnarok. This title was sent to me by PlayStation Portugal so I could give it a look and tell you my opinions on it. I've only had access for a couple of days, which is why this is a first impressions video and not a full-on review. I went into the game pretty much blind to the most promotional material, since I believe nowadays most publishers have a bad tendency to reveal far too much content that I'd prefer to experience with a controller in my hands instead of a YouTube video. And I'd recommend most of you do the same if you're interested in playing this title, since in my opinion, the combat, cinematics, animations are simply gorgeous. And if you're a fan of the 2018 God of War, you're most likely going to love this one. In case you're concerned about spoilers, I'll be sure to choose combat gameplay and maybe just a little bit of puzzle solving and exploration without actually showing you any of the major battles or cinematics that I've seen so far. Still, the most important portion of this video is going to be the audio, so it's pretty much safe to minimize the window if you do not want to see any gameplay at all. Also, just a heads up, I'd avoid reading the comment section in this video. I know I'm not going to, as the developers themselves have already confirmed that a couple of stores broke street dates, and therefore spoilers are pretty much all over the web. Thread carefully, let's get started. For those of you living under a rock, God of War Ragnarok is a third-person action-adventure game by Santa Monica Studios, and it is a continuation of the 2018 release of God of War, which, by the way, I thought was an absolute banger and I would wholeheartedly recommend you check out, regardless if you decide to play Ragnarok or not. I'm going to be linking the review to that game in the upper right corner of this video, just in case you're interested. Now, naturally, with this being a sequel, some of you might wonder, do I need to play the original game in order to understand this one? In my opinion, yep, you definitely should. While they have a brief recap of the events of the first game, which you can access from the main menu, I found it to be extremely short, with fast-paced editing, and it lacks a lot of information and nuance that you can really only get by playing the first game. That is, if you care about story at all. Now, I'm going to start us off with a very short summary of my experience so far, and then I'm going to go into further detail throughout the rest of the video. Overall, I've been having an absolute blast. The combat feels great, the spectacle fights and sequences are phenomenal, the visuals are the best that I've seen on PlayStation 5 so far, which was to be expected, I guess. The cinematics are perfectly animated, sounds are very immersive, and the gameplay is brutally satisfying, with some very minor gripes I'll detail in the gameplay section. A couple of weeks ago, you guys might remember I streamed a little bit of the previous title, God of War 2018, and I remember during that stream saying something in the lines of, this game just feels good to play. And that feeling is very much the same here. If you liked God of War in 2018, you're going to love this one. However, if you didn't, then this one is most likely not going to win you over either. As per usual with my videos, I'm going to be starting us off with visuals, then I'm going to proceed to sound and story, which is going to consist mostly of early broad strokes with no spoilers. So like I said, I probably put it in the title as well. This video does not contain any spoilers, you're pretty much safe. And then we're going to be moving on to gameplay. There should be chapter markers in the video, so feel free to use those to navigate to the section that you're interested in. Visuals. As I said in my summary, these are the best visuals I've seen on the console so far, but it is important to mention that everything I talk about on this section, or throughout the whole video for that matter, is based on the PlayStation 5 version of the game, since there's no way I'm actually going to have the time to test out the PlayStation 4 version, because I actually want to, play the game, enjoy the game, do all of these things, right? Anyway, I don't know what kind of sorcery they're doing, but the game can actually run faster than 60 FPS. I believe it's running at around 120, but please do double check that with Digital Foundry, since they're the ones with all of the tools and all of the analysis and stuff. But while it's running at around 120, it is still able to maintain really good visuals. That is assuming, of course, your monitor can support more than 60 FPS, which I only recently was able to get a monitor that goes beyond 60 FPS so that I can gorge myself on all of these delicious frames. Now, there's a couple of options you can play around with. You have your default choice between resolution and frame rate, and an additional setting for higher frame rates. Since there appears to be a small reload when you toggle the higher frame rate setting, I believe they are indeed lowering visuals or tweaking dynamic resolution, or even both. But after testing it out, the game still looks awesome. So if, like me, you're a sucker for higher frame rates, go for it. Now, the main reason I've been mostly playing in 60 FPS is because I've been recording most of my gameplay, and the capture card pass-through does limit my visual options. Because let me tell you, when I plugged my PlayStation 5 directly into my new monitor, what an absolute feast for the eyes. Proper HDR, silky smooth 120 FPS. Oh my god, the sacrifices I make to create content. I've played 15 hours of the game or something on 60 FPS when I could have been playing it at 120, but I wouldn't have been able to record any of it. However, I must say that when I tested out going from performance to resolution, it was pretty friggin' jarring. Going from 60 FPS to 30 FPS made the game almost unplayable for me. And I usually don't really mind slower frame rates as I play a lot of games on the Switch. But I know there's actually quite a few of you out there that do like to play in 4K 30 FPS, so the option is there. But personally, I definitely recommend frame rate over resolution, as the combat just feels much more responsive. Anyway, beyond the visuals themselves, the animations look fantastic, be it in regular combat, executions, action cinematics, or more calm exposure moments. Everything looks and animates great. Sounds. Sound effects are all excellent and incredibly immersive. From throwing the Leviathan axe, the crackling thunders from Thor, the chunky hits, the sound of steel penetrating the flesh of your enemies, or even something as simple as the audio cues from one of Odin's ravens, it all sounds good. The soundtrack also stands out, and they are not scared of placing it center stage in moments of high action, boss fights, and important cinematics. Now, in terms of voice acting, it's also extremely well done. The actors deliver an extremely good performance that brings a lot of emotion to the characters on screen. One thing that threw me off a little was when I initially heard some of the characters speak, because it was almost as if the voice didn't quite match the face. But I think that's because I just expected more characters to sound similar to Kratos with deep voices. But after a few hours, I actually came to appreciate the voice textures and variety of the cast, because their voices are deeply connected to the characters' personalities, which can sometimes be surprising, especially because I avoided promotional material, so I didn't really know what they were going to sound like. Overall, it's a fantastic audio experience. Story. There should be chapters in the video, so feel free to skip over this section if you're worried about spoilers, but I'll keep this as brief as possible. The game picks up about 3 years after the events of the previous title, and Midgard is undergoing Fimbulwinter, which according to Norse mythology is the long winter that precedes Ragnarok, the end of the world. Atreus is still struggling to understand his role in the events that are taking place based on the revelations of the first game. His relationship with Kratos once again takes center stage. However, from what I've played so far, I'm going to wager that Atreus' role is going to be much more significant this time around. So far, I greatly enjoyed the team's portrayal of the Norse pantheon. Thor looks friggin' amazing, and Odin was actually really surprising. There really isn't much else I can say without jumping into spoiler territory, but from what I've played so far, I'm really liking the direction the story is going. But naturally, as I've had limited time with the game, I reserve the right to change my mind after I finish it. Now, before I move on to the next section, I'd just like to point out once again, I heavily recommend that you play God of War 2018 ahead of playing this one, as I don't really think the recap is enough to fully appreciate the story of Ragnarok. Gameplay. God of War Ragnarok is a third-person action-adventure game with a heavy emphasis on narrative. Your expected gameplay loop is going to be cinematic into exploration with combat, light puzzle solving, more combat, and repeat. The game also features some light RPG elements in the form of talent trees and gear, which is going to influence your playstyle. There's currently 5 different difficulty options. I've been playing on the one just above normal, which is challenging enough whilst also allowing me to do more than just spam axe throw most of the time. The combat is still very enjoyable. It has a satisfying chunkiness to it, which was also characteristic of the first title. However, this also means that very much like the first title, the close-up camera angle can make it hard for you to fight multiple enemies at the same time, especially when there's several enemy types designed to jump behind you or simply jump out of your field of vision, essentially exploiting a gameplay weakness that is there to provide you with a more cinematic experience. Now, there are callouts from your companions and a threat indicator to help you in keeping tabs on enemies that are off-screen, but this was something I was really hoping to see more improvements on. Having said that, I still greatly enjoy the combat, and once you start committing enemy types to muscle memory, you're going to start adapting to their tricks, but it does mean that on the harder difficulties, you're going to end up with quite a bit of trial and error when it comes to combat. The skill trees have been changed, but should still feel familiar with a little twist. Some of the skills can now receive mod tokens, which add small modifiers to the skills, like increased damage, increased element, more defense, more stun, etc. Unlocking these tokens basically is going to require you to land the specific skills on enemies multiple times. The light puzzle sections are still fairly simple, and usually your companions will throw some hints in the eventuality that you get stuck. There's still some Metroidvania elements as well, so if you're a completionist, there's going to be backtracking involved, which they pretty much let you roam the different realms freely as you complete your first foray into them, at least up until the point that I'm at in the game. While the game itself is mostly linear, if you are just following the story, you're given a varying degree of freedom of exploration, and there's always hidden stuff in every corner, even during the more linear sections. In conclusion, God of War Ragnarok improves on the formula of the previous entry in the franchise, but doesn't really break the mold. It delivers a solid, polished experience that keeps you coming back for more, whether you're into the chunky violent combat, the story, or both. It's an easy recommendation if you are into God of War. Thank you all very much for watching my first impressions on God of War Ragnarok. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like. And if you enjoy my content, subscribe and hit the bell notification icon. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.